These are your notes on the elements of literature. You guys took a pre-test on the elements of literature, and so these are your notes to know those terms. We're going to start with character or characters. A character is a person or an animal that takes part in the action of a literary work. Someone that takes part in the action of the story. It can be people, it could be animals, or it could even be creatures. If a plastic Mr. Potato Head takes part in the action of the story, then he is a character. Characterization is the means by which the author establishes the character, creates that character for you as the reader. And there are two primary ways that the author does this, and that's directly telling you what they're like, and indirectly showing you what they're like. Setting it up so that you can tell what they're like without directly saying it in so many words. Okay, so let's talk about those a little bit more. Direct characterization. This is when they're just telling you the personality. They're telling you the characteristic traits. If they said the patient boy and the quiet girl were both well behaved and did not disobey their mother, that author's characterizing them as patient, quiet, well-behaved, and you don't have to guess at their actions. The author's using those words directly, telling you. Indirect characterization is much more common with professional authors. They might directly characterize them earlier on in the story, but mostly they're going to show things that reveal the personality of the character because it's more interesting to read a story and have them revealed that way. You can remember the acronym STEAL because it will tell you the ways that indirect characterization happens through their speech, their thought, their effect on others, their actions, and their looks. So as the author describes how they look or what they think or the effect they have on others, these are all the different ways that they can indirectly characterize that, that character. You've got protagonists, also known as the good guy, the main characters, and there are many protagonists that are found in literature, and I could tell from your pretest that folks had a pretty good idea what a protagonist is. The antagonists being the bad guys.
The power of the dark side.
The bad guys. Against the good guy. Theme. The theme of the literary work is the central message, the concern, the purpose, the reason it's being written to get what life lesson across. It can be expressed as a generalization, some kind of statement, but it could also just be something you have to infer. It's probably not directly stated. Attention, you're supposed to learn to be kind to others by reading my story. The writer is going to mostly present it indirectly. Your reader is going to have to figure out the theme by looking at what the character goes through and what the story reveals about people and about life. Okay, there's a trick that I always tell folks in class. Remember, theme is the message. Okay, theme is the message, the life message. Be kind to others. Remember who your friends are. Money can't buy happiness. Just sort of those little life lessons, those messages about life that they won't say directly, but you'll pick up from what the author has the characters go through. Setting. Everyone knows the setting of the literary work is the time and place of the action. But think about time details. That's going to include the year, the time of day, maybe even the weather, because it could be different if it's the beach versus a cold time of year in the weather. The place details. It might be a specific country or state or region or neighborhood or a specific place in the home. So the place could be different kinds of specifications as to what does that place mean. Details such as dialect, one of your terms of dialect that we'll talk about in a minute, but details such as dialect, clothing, and customs, and modes of transportation all can establish the setting, and one story might not take place in different times or different places. The events, the plot can even be affected by the setting. In most stories, the setting serves as a backdrop, a context in which the characters interact. The setting of a story often helps create a particular mood or feeling. The setting's often used to create the mood. However, sometimes the setting's very imperative. You could not have all summer in a day where they're on Venus and it rains and it only has 1 hour of sun every 7 years. That story's events wouldn't take place in Raleigh. It wouldn't make any sense. The setting is crucial. So the setting sometimes is crucial to the story. You've got here the setting and a map. Take a look at it. The setting can be the time. Think of the time of that person's life. It could be the era, like the 60s era, general, time. It could also be a time in history, like World War II history, or a time of day. Also related to the setting is the place, the physical place or the location. And again, the setting sets the atmosphere, the mood. The author sets it up with word choice, which affects their tone, the feelings of the characters. The weather can set up that atmosphere, that feeling. So all of those things are related to setting. Then there's the term conflict. Conflict is the struggle between two opposing forces in a story or a play. It doesn't have to be two characters. If one character's out in the elements in a snowstorm, that's two opposing forces. So it doesn't have to be two characters. But there are two types of conflict. There's internal conflict, where one character is wrestling with something in their mind. What am I going to do about this? Or how do I play this? What decision should I make? Or should I make decision A or B? What's going to happen? That's an internal conflict. Internal conflicts can only happen in the mind versus external conflicts. External conflicts can be physical, but they can also be a battle of words, and that's sometimes confusing to people. There can be a physical conflict, or there could just be an argument, but that is still external because it's outside the mind of one character. Plot is the sequence of events. This happens, then this happens, then this happens. And you are familiar with this, the plot diagram shape, the exposition in the beginning, and then the rising action. Climax is the highest point, then the falling action, and then the resolution. So you're familiar with this shape. The exposition is that part of the work that introduces the character's setting, basic situation, where they live, what life is like for them. The rising action is that part of the plot that begins to occur as soon as the conflict's introduced. Once you know the character's problem, then things start to rise. That's the rising action. It adds to the complications, to the conflict, it increases reader interest, and it builds. The plot thickens, as they say. The climax is that highest point of greatest emotional intensity, interest, or suspense in the plot of a narrative. And the climax typically comes at a turning point of a story or drama. Things after that resolve. So this is the highest point before things start to resolve to the end. It is not dead middle of the story like that drawing tends to look to people. It's usually toward the end, because after that there's the falling action that follows the climax, reveals its results, and the resolution, the how does it end, revealing or suggesting the outcome of the conflict. Is it happily ever after? What happens? And those two things are usually much shorter. Falling action is much shorter than all the rising action and the build of the suspense. The mood or atmosphere is the feeling created in the reader by a literary work or passage. Mood is me. So me as the reader, how do I feel reading it? It's a created feeling. Let's look at this passage. Gently smiling, the mother tenderly tucked the covers up around the child's neck and carefully, quietly left the room, making sure to leave a comforting ray of light shining from the open door should the child wake. So this very gentle mood, very peaceful. You've got words like quietly and carefully and just what she's doing. You can tell it's a very quiet, gentle mood. It's giving you a peaceful feeling as the reader. This is a little different than tone, although they're very similar and people do get them confused. Tone is a reflection of a writer's or speaker's attitude toward a subject of a poem, story, or other literary work. So tone is communicated through words and details that express particular emotions that evoke an emotional response from the reader. So mood, me, the reader. Tone, author has a T in it. Tone is the author. So let's say the author is writing an angry letter about something, a letter to the editor, and it's something you're happy about as the reader. They don't always match. They often match, but they don't always match. So the author might use word choice and phrasing They might convey respect, anger, lightheartedness, sarcasm, but they are trying to get that across. You can't hear that tone in their voice. When your parents speak your name, you know, sometimes there's that tone, you know if you're in trouble or not. The author's not next to you speaking, so they have to find a way on paper to communicate a tone. Let's look at another paragraph here. During the whole of a dull, dark, and soundless day in the autumn of the year, when the clouds hung oppressively low in the heavens, I had been passing alone on horseback through a singularly dreary tract of country. At length I found myself, as the shades of the evening drew on, within the view of the melancholy house of Usher. I reined my horse to the precipitous brink of a black and lurid tarn that lay unruffled by the dwelling, with vacant and eye-like windows. Again, the author's not next to you, but I see a lot of words here that give me an indication of sort of a melancholy and almost severe type of tone. Let's look at it. You've got the words dull, dark, soundless, oppressively low, alone, dreary, melancholy, which is sort of a serious kind of sad, precipitous brink, vacant, empty, eye-like windows. So the tone this author is creating is a very melancholy, almost sad in a still, quiet, serious kind of way. And it's the mood I might feel as the reader, but it's clearly also the author's tone. They are creating it. He's creating it very clearly with word choice in this case. Dialogue. Dialogue is another term on your list. Dialogue is a conversation between characters in the story. That's it. There's two or more characters talking. Quotation marks, showing that they're talking. Now, not all dialogue has dialect, but dialect often is showing dialogue. Dialect is when there's a particular form of language that is peculiar to a specific region, a social group. People often think of a southern dialect. They think of it as being, you know, a country dialect in class like this particular cartoon shows. That doesn't have to be the case. It doesn't have to be an accent either. It can just be the use of a word. This map shows generic names for soft drinks by counties in the United States. The blue areas, the darker blue, the more high percentage of people that call a generic soft drink pop. They would call it pop. Whereas where it's red, especially when it's severely red, they would call it Coke. Not just a Coca-Cola, but any kind of, I almost said soda, because that's what I call it, because my family's from the Northeast, and there you'll see it's called soda, and there are other terms as well. So it can be an accent or pronunciation, but it also can be just a use of words, whether you call soda, pop, Coke, or what else you would call a soft drink. Point of view is one of your terms. That's the perspective from which the story is told. You've got first person. That's told directly from the narrator's point of view. Look for words like I, us, me, we, like the author, the narrator is in the story talking to you. Third person's different. Third person's not told from the perspective of a character in the story. It'll only be he, them, or talking as though it's a neutral voice of all the characters. So you've got first person and third person. Let's look at it. The true story of the three little pigs versus the picture of the three little pigs. That rotten wolf tried to eat us, the pig squealed. They said, that group of pigs. Not like they're talking directly to you. Versus if the wolf said, I was framed. I just wanted to borrow a cup of sugar. He's talking as if he is in the story, versus someone who's just saying, the pig did this, the wolf did this. That is third person. You won't have a story of second person in this particular in the stories or in this particular test. So that concludes your terms for elements of literature. I hope this was helpful. Send me a message via Edmodo or see me in class if you have questions. Bye, guys.